readers, I'm Amy, and I'm your nonfiction feminist. Today, I am bringing you Diagnosis Female, How Medical Bias Endangers Women's Health. This is brought to us by Emily Dwas. She has written for the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, a bunch of other big papers. She really tends to focus on health-related topics, and she is currently a freelance health writer in LA. So, not saying that an author can't write whatever it is that they want to write, but it is nice to know that the author of this nonfiction book kind of knows what she's talking about. I have a specific structure set up whenever I review fiction books, but I don't think I've reviewed a nonfiction book yet, so I'm just gonna kind of wing it. And in winging it, this is about women's health, so I've also got some tea to spill here. So in talking about medical bias and how it endangers women's health, basically everything that we know about the medical field, we know because of men. Males are the default body. I remember learning about anatomy whenever I was in elementary school, and it was this sort of art/health project that we had to do where we had a really big sheet of paper and we each laid down on our own paper, and we would have a friend who would trace our outline, and then we would color and cut out a bunch of the organs to paste onto our outline. That was our anatomy lesson. But I distinctly remember that there was no uterus involved in learning that anatomy. By the time you're in 6th grade, you're usually learning about your period, so why is it that we haven't learned where the uterus is placed and all of that? Women have an entire extra organ. You'd think we would learn about that. And this isn't just about anatomy lessons, it's also all of the research in the medical field. So how's that birth control working out for you?
I don't think I'm pregnant.
Great! Thanks for contributing to the study. Men as the default body, really, it's a huge problem. This extends to research where historically, nearly all of our research, and even a lot of our research currently, involved males as the figures that we were studying. This really comes into play in the chapter on cardiology when we're talking about strokes and heart attacks, because whenever you think of someone having a stroke or having a heart attack, they might have the chest pains and their arms getting tingly. Women won't necessarily have those signs. We might have very, very different signs that we're having a heart attack or a stroke, and you wouldn't know what they are because they're not what's discussed. If someone's having a stroke or a heart attack, it's either a male in the media or a female portraying the male symptoms in the media. That's not necessarily the way that it's going to go, and that's one of the big reasons why a lot of things are misdiagnosed for women. Another big thing in this was the neurology chapter where the author herself talks about the brain tumor that she had. It was misdiagnosed, I think at least twice, maybe a couple more times. And once she finally got it removed, it ended up coming back again. But people kept telling her, it's all in your head. Literally. There's nothing wrong with you. Just take some pills, or try this diagnosis, or try this diagnosis. And ends up she had a brain tumor. And that's really, really serious to be something that you're misdiagnosing. Maybe you should have done a CAT scan in the first place.
Ugh, when is she gonna shut up? She just keeps going on and on and on.
Something else to note here that really got me with this book. There was one part, I think it was a quote by a doctor, where she was saying that a diagnosis is really nothing more than an opinion. And that's a really scary quote to think about, but it's true. I mean, everyone who studies medicine, they're going to have different teachers or go to different schools. Those teachers will have had different life experiences and different schooling experiences. Then you have everyone bringing their own opinion to the table. And a diagnosis is essentially an opinion. Someone's opinion of what's wrong with you. And that just, wow. Those opinions lead to a lot of misdiagnoses. And I think a lot of times it's really hard for us to divide fact and opinion. I mean, look at politics. They're a complete mess. For me personally, opinions really have come into play with chronic illness. I've dealt with a couple of different chronic illness diagnoses. I was going through a lot as a kid, and it was misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis. And I was dealing with all this other health stuff at the time, and it was basically creating a domino effect. But because no one fixed the initial problem that I went in for, everything kept playing into everything else. Like, people's opinions were that there was nothing really wrong with me, or that somehow my diagnoses were my own fault. And that was really, really frustrating. And that comes into play here, too. Not only in chronic illness, but they also discuss obstetrics and gynecology, where if you're having your period, a lot of times periods come with cramps. That's kind of a fact of life. But there's a line between a period cramp and a dying in bed, can't go to school, can't go to work kind of a cramp. And a lot of times that's a sign of endometriosis or ovarian cysts, and those can seriously affect your life and the decisions that you end up making. And the doctors just don't care. They're diagnosing all of these women with just, oh, you just have period cramps. Take an Advil. Like, an Advil will not fix your endometriosis. That's not how that works. Get in there, get it taken care of, see what kind of long-term care and pills you might be looking at, what kind of therapies you might be able to do to make it easier. But it was just really frustrating to watch this. And I know that I had a lot of trouble with doctors growing up, but it wasn't until reading this book that I really, really realized, like, a lot of the stuff that I dealt with had to do with biases, not only against my age, because how could a child possibly deal with chronic illness, but also to do with me being a female. The last chapter in this book discusses another super important topic, and that is advocating for yourself and communication. This is a hard one. Like, I'm really glad that it had that chapter where it was talking about how do you communicate with your doctor, how do you advocate for yourself. But also, as is evidenced throughout this entire book, a lot of times, no matter how well we communicate, the doctors just won't listen. Or when it comes to advocating for yourself, and I've been here, whenever you're high on your medications and you're sleeping because of all the drugs that you had during your surgery, and you're in a lot of pain because of what you went through, you're not really in any condition to advocate for yourself. And that's where you really have to talk to your friends and your family and find someone who really knows your conditions, knows what you're dealing with, and can advocate for you when you're in that state of not being able to advocate for yourself. And as far as advocating, really the one big con that I had with this book, a lot of the perspectives were middle and upper class women, which made a very good point, where even doctors who were dealing with illnesses and became patients themselves, they were big name doctors, or you had a big name author that was featured in this book. And it doesn't matter how well known you are, if you're a woman, people still really aren't going to listen to you and believe that something's wrong with you. They're just going to think you're hysterical, you're stressed out, and it's all in your head. But as great as it was to make that point, it really would have been nice to see more people who are really just in the bottom of the barrel in life. Like, I work with those kind of people. I've previously worked with those people whenever I was a case manager. Case management is always being threatened and often cut out completely, and we're the ones who are helping people navigate their insurance companies and their school paperwork. And if you're someone who's struggling to support your family, who can't work because you're dealing with a chronic illness, who always has to keep track of all of this paperwork just to prove that you're poor, you're trying to stay on Medicaid, which is always being threatened, your case management's been cut, like, how the hell do you advocate for your medical care? That's got to be hard if you can even afford the time to go to the doctor in the first place. And that's assuming that you have a way to travel to the doctor. I really think that perspective would have added a lot to this book. That said, I did really get a lot out of this. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Yeah, it needed some stuff added to it, but I would still recommend it to everyone. Like, if you want to know anything about the medical industry, dip your toes into this. It's also not a super dry read. It includes a lot of research and a lot of quotes and interviews, but it was still very much a readable nonfiction. I didn't slog through it at any point. Yeah, so it's an accessible read on the medical industry, which is really nice to see. That is kind of all I have for you on this. Please like, subscribe, be my friend, ring the notification bell. Don't forget to leave your hate comments on this video down below. That'll be exciting. And I will see you all in my next one. Bye, friends.
What, are you recording?
Yes.
But it's not plugged in.
What's wrong with me? Sweetie, I'm sorry. Plugged in, okay.